SHTF foraging. Learn it now, your life may depend on it. Okay, that was a bit melodramatic and maybe a bit clickbaity. But look at history. Have you ever heard of the Hunger Winter? It was in between 1944 and 1945 in the Netherlands, and the Germans had kind of blockaded the area, so food and supplies couldn't be brought in, and they had a horrendous winter. Anyway, originally in 1944, the government was giving out food vouchers that would give you about 1,400 calories a day a person. Well, by 1945, it became 500 calories a person, and people were starving. And the government wanted people to forage, find edible food in the forest on their property. But those in the country knew somewhat what to do, but in the city, generally they didn't. Now, the government interceded and gave everyone, I think it was almost a year old, tulip bulbs. And believe it or not, you can eat tulip bulbs. You just have to take out the bitter part in the core. Now, I have no idea how they taste. No, I've never seen them on any menu, nor do I really want to taste tulip bulbs. I do know, however, my squirrels think they're very tasty, which is why I don't have any tulips. But anyway, people had to eat tulip bulbs. And I gotta ask, wouldn't that happen here today? How many people know how to forage for wild edibles? I mean, it's great, it's free food, and who doesn't like free? But a lot of time, this knowledge has not been passed down by great-grandparents, grandparents, parents to children, and it has died. So I'm telling you, learn how to forage in your area. And if you already forage, expand what you forage for. I urge you to find what wild edibles are in your area, how to harvest them, and how to prepare them, and make a map of your area and put in the dates when it can be expected. I mean, this is a great prepping document. Now, if you've ever seen my yard, it looks green from a distance. Well, right now it has little yellow dots on it, but it looks green. And we say, if it's green, let it be, because we're in the country. We don't have perfect yards. In fact, my yard is what I call a salad yard, because I can go out and pick things right from my yard for a salad. Can you do that in the city if you have perfect green turf? I don't think so. Here's that dandelion. You can eat the flowers. Every spring my uncle would like us to gather them because he'd make his famous dandelion wine. And you can eat the leaves. My mom and her sisters would love in the spring to have fresh dandelion greens. They kind of thought it was kind of a spring tonic that they made of greens every spring. So, and it's pretty. On Mother's Day, how many of you mothers have received a bouquet of these from your little children? But we call them weeds. Now this pretty little weed is purslane, and you can eat it raw in salads just like you do spinach. Here's my arch nemesis, the garlic mustard. I'll be pulling this because it's in one of my garden beds. It is not native, and it's invasive, and it crowds out all the native plants in the woods. But people say it makes great pesto. And look at this little pretty wild violet. You can eat the flower raw. Put it in salads. Have a lot of vitamin A and vitamin C. Another very invasive plant that grows on my property is mint. So this whole area by the chicken coop, it's all mint. It smells really good, and it helps cut down on the smell of the chicken poop. And when you pick it, makes great iced tea. So all these brambles here, these are wild raspberries. And in the summer, we'll have a raspberry harvest. And I love making a quick cobbler with them. Now, you might have landscape trees that produce fruit or nuts. think of a crabapple. It's so beautiful. I love my crabapple tree. Just blooms gorgeous. But in the fall we also have wonderful little crab apples. And I've made crabapple juice and crabapple jelly from them. Yes, it's decorative, but you can also eat it. We are also blessed with wild cherry trees, and those give little black cherries, and you can make juice from them or jelly also. And some people make an alcohol from them. And it just grows free in my yard. We also are blessed with nut trees. Here's the shagbark hickory nut tree. You can tell it by its bark, and it gives us hickory nuts. So I have some here on the property, but I also have some in the woods that we gather from in the fall. And of course, if you've watched my channel, you know I love black walnuts. We have a black walnut tree here on our property, but we also have them in the woods and along our road. And yes, I will gather those black walnuts every fall, go through the laborious process of actually drying them and getting the nuts out, but I think it's very worth it. And remember, in times of duress, protein is very important, and nuts are an excellent protein. We also have plenty of pine trees in the woods and on our property, and I made spruce tip jelly before, and I've made tea. Again, another great source, the tea is, of vitamin C. Now in the woods next to my property, right now it is ramp season, just getting done. So if you've been watching my channel, you've been seeing some ramp recipes, because my family, we love ramps. And I will gather them each spring and make a delicious recipe, because they have such a unique flavor and they're only available for such a short period of time. Another great thing to forage. Now, my son was just over with a friend and we went looking for morel mushrooms. We didn't find them yet. We usually don't find them here, the later ones, until around the third week in May. It's always late here at our property. But again, mushrooms, a great thing to forage. My husband loves morel mushrooms. Neither my son or I really eat them. I mean, we could, but we just don't care. We might also find some dried saddles, and my husband likes that in a dish also, and maybe even some oyster mushrooms. Talking about mushrooms, did you know that here in Michigan there are over 2,500 varieties of wild mushrooms, and 100 of those are edible. So I have a lot of mushrooms still to identify and discover. But that's part of the fun of foraging. So the wood that's next to our house has a great bounty of free edibles. It also has an old apple tree, and yes, the apples are definitely not perfect, but I've picked them, cut out the bad parts, and made pie. It tasted great. The apples were just fine, and the deer sure love them. So have I convinced you to forage yet? Well, you need to do this first. It's important to know how to identify things correctly. I mean, have you ever heard that some mushrooms you can never eat? Well, that's not true. It's an old Croatian saying, you can eat every mushroom at least once. Yes, because one of them might be the last thing you eat. So what do you need? You need a good guide or knowledgeable person to guide you. Now, I had bought this before, the Prepper's Ultimate Forager's Bible. It's by Leslie Hiding. I don't think it was really worth the price. I think it was like $26. It does have good pictures in it, very big print. It's okay. It just doesn't have some of the detail that a lot of other guides do. But in case you're interested, it's the Prepper's Ultimate Forager's Bible. One that I think is excellent is the Complete Guide to Edible Wild Plants. It's by, the U.S. Army. And there's also a freebie, an older version, PDF version online, and I have the link below if you're interested. But it really is just great for the pictures, what it shows, what it tells you. It tells you what parts are edible and how you might have to prepare it. It also tells you if there's any medicinal value and gives you various warnings like caution, green bamboo may explode in a fire. Green bamboo has an internal membrane you must remove before using it as a food or water container. Because this book was built for surviving in the outdoors. So it gives you a lot of tidbits that you don't find always in normal foraging books. Highly recommend it or the online PDF version. Now another one that I enjoyed reading was The Forager's Harvest, Edible Wild Plants, and it is by Samuel Thayer. Very, very detailed, beautiful pictures, tells you where to find it, where to harvest it, how to harvest it, and how to prepare it. A lot of detail in the preparation and even how to store it. So this book I found was a fantastic foraging guide. Now, I urge you to find guides that are more for the area where you live. I mean, I don't really need to know anything about cacti, but if you live in Arizona, maybe you do. But I have one called Midwest Foraging, and it's 115 wild and flavorful edibles from burdock to wild peach by Lisa M. Rose, and she has other guides for other parts of the country. Again, found it very, very good. Beautiful pictures in it, a lot of information, and again, she tells you how to eat, what vitamins it has, can it make a mineral-rich drink, that type of thing. So, I really enjoyed this book. And finally, if you're going for mushrooms, really get something detailed for your area. This is Mushrooms of the Upper Midwest, which is great for me. And it has, one section in here, it's got the skull and crossbones, right? These are the toxic plants, or toxic mushrooms or fungi. You want to make sure you know what those are. Like right here are the false morels, beefsteaks. Now many people do eat them, but the thought is that it takes time for the toxins to build up in the body, and you never know when your time is up. So this gives you a lot of information. You want to be very, very careful when you're identifying certain mushrooms. You also have to for plants. I mean, here I have, is this pigweed? Or is it a medicinal plant? Which is it? They can look very similar, so you have to be very careful. Don't eat anything that you aren't 100% sure of. It's not worth it. We aren't starving to death now. Number 2, respect the ecosystem of where the plant or fungi or mushroom is growing. If it is a protected area, leave it alone. Also, don't over-harvest. Otherwise, it won't be there in the future or for future generations. Be smart. Number 3, be sure you know how to cook whatever it is that you gather. There are very specific rules. For instance, mushrooms should never be eaten raw. So how should you prepare them? Well, find out. And also find a great recipe that you will enjoy when you eat one of the wild edibles. This can be fun from a culinary point of view as well as from a prepping point of view. And know your rules where you live in your state. Someplace like New York and California, you can't gather anything in a city park or a state park. Here in Michigan, we can gather like morel mushrooms in a state park, for instance, but we can't tap maple tree for syrup. We would have to do that on private land instead. So there's all specific rules. Never go on somebody's private property without permission. But be safe and learn the rules where you live. So, I hope you get out and forage today, this week, this month, whatever. It's more than just preparing for the apocalypse. It's fun, and it puts you in balance with nature. You discover a lot of neat things. I mean, we'll go out and we usually see one of my favorite things in spring to see, which is an eastern box turtle. We have quite a few in the woods, and I guess they can live for 50 to 100 years depending on who you believe. So they're a pretty amazing animal. And we have found a variety of animals, be it baby raccoons, possums, turkeys, deer, even a coyote once, and foxes. So it's really fun to go into the woods and discover what nature has for you and what free edibles that you can find. So I urge you, get off your duff, go out into the woods or out into your prairie or out even into your yard and see what you can identify as an edible. I do have links down below, and if you're interested, here's my foraging playlist. Thank you.